You're sitting in a meeting, someone's talking. You're nodding. And somewhere underneath the table, or maybe right there in plain sight, your fingers have found your mouth, and you don't even remember deciding to do that. That's the thing about nail biting. It doesn't announce itself. It just happens. And then you catch yourself, feel vaguely embarrassed, and stop until 5 minutes later when you don't. Most people write this off as a nervous habit. A childhood thing you never quite outgrew. Maybe something to fix. But what if that framing is slightly wrong, or at least wildly incomplete? Because the psychology behind chronic nail biting, what researchers actually call onychophagia, points to something far more interesting than simple anxiety. Here's the reframe. Nail biting isn't just about being stressed. It's about what you do with overstimulation. And that distinction matters more than most people realize. Jerome Kagan, the Harvard developmental psychologist who spent decades studying temperament, identified something he called high-reactive infants, babies who responded intensely to new stimuli, to noise, to change, to uncertainty. These weren't anxious children exactly. They were children whose nervous systems were finely tuned, acutely sensitive to their environment in ways others simply weren't. And those children grew into adults who needed more active ways to regulate what they were feeling. Nail biting, in that context, isn't a malfunction. It's a regulation strategy, imperfect but effective. The repetitive motion activates a feedback loop, sensory input that helps your nervous system find its floor when it's been pushed too high. What's compelling is who tends to do it. Research published in Body Image Journal found that body-focused repetitive behaviors, the category nail biting falls into, are significantly more common in people who describe themselves as perfectionists, not in the vague aspirational sense, but in the clinical sense. People who experience frustration acutely when things don't move at the pace or quality they expect. People who are easily bored by tasks that don't demand enough of them. That last part is the thing nobody usually leads with. Boredom, not stress. Stuart Montgomery's work, along with later researchers studying BFRB patterns, found that these behaviors spike not just under pressure, but during understimulation, waiting rooms, long calls, repetitive tasks. Your brain is essentially looking for something to do with its excess capacity, and your fingers have volunteered, which means the people most likely to bite their nails are often the same people whose minds run fast, who notice things, who find themselves impatient, not with others necessarily, but with pace, with friction, with the gap between what they're capable of and what the moment is asking of them. There's a hidden layer here that makes this more nuanced than a simple trait list. Nail biters often have a complicated relationship with physical sensation. Research from the University of Montreal found that people with BFRBs report higher baseline levels of what's called interoceptive sensitivity. They are more aware of what's happening inside their bodies than average, more tuned in to tension, restlessness, discomfort, which sounds like it would make them better at managing those feelings. But the opposite is often true. The more clearly you feel something, the more urgently you want to address it. So the habit forms not because you're weak or unaware, but because you feel things precisely, and your body found a solution before your conscious mind got involved. That said, and this is worth sitting with, the same sensitivity that makes nail biters more attuned, more emotionally perceptive, more likely to pick up on what others miss, can also tip into avoidance. The relief the behavior provides is real but short-lived, and over time, it can become a shortcut your brain takes before you've fully processed what you're actually feeling. The regulation becomes the escape route, and eventually you stop noticing the road you're avoiding. John Cacioppo's work on self-regulation suggests that these habits get stickier in people who are socially attuned, who read rooms, who feel the weight of expectations, who carry a low hum of awareness about how they're landing in the world. The behavior becomes a private, invisible release valve for a very visible, socially monitored life. If this is hitting somewhere specific for you, not because you're broken, but because something in here sounds oddly familiar, that's probably the point. The psychology here isn't telling you that nail biting is a superpower. It isn't. But it is telling you something about the kind of mind it tends to do it. Fast, sensitive, easily understimulated and easily overloaded, sometimes both within the same hour. Aware, holding a lot. And maybe what's more useful than stopping the habit tomorrow is getting a little more curious about what it's doing for you, what it's regulating, what it's replacing, and what might work better that your nervous system would actually accept. The habit isn't the interesting thing. What it's pointing to is, if this kind of psychology lands for you, the real mechanics of behavior, not the cleaned up version, there's more of it here. Subscribing means you'll actually see it when it comes out, which apparently the algorithm is not reliably handling on anyone's behalf.